Soy Pedro Leal, de Mater Spei.
I am Pedro Leal from Mater Spei. Everything you're about to watch comes from an intense love for the Pope and the Catholic Church. It is an effort to offer information and testimonies that can help unveil what really took place in Garabandal. This love for the truth and for the Church is what inspired us to undertake this production. The definitive evaluation of these events corresponds to Catholic Church authority, to whose judgment we submit. I hope this film can help you all to grow closer to the Lord and our Mother. Thank you.
Sometimes the most important events in history are the ones that get ignored and silenced, as if you could somehow bottle up the outpour of a tremendous waterfall. Why is that? We argue that what took place in the 1960s in Saint Sebastian of Garabandal is one of the most important events in human history. But not only that, this event, this message is important for you. In Garabandal, our Blessed Mother came from heaven with a call to conversion for all her children. Less and less importance is being given to the Holy Eucharist. You must make more sacrifices. You are now in the last warnings. She even mentioned a warning, a miracle, and a possible chastisement. The Mother of God came to a little village in northern Spain to help her children during a very difficult time for the Church and for all of humanity. What was she talking about? Are we on the verge of something huge? Many priests, bishops, and cardinals are leading souls to perdition. That was hard to believe in the 1960s. But what about now? Over the span of this investigation, we will speak with experts, doctors, theologians, and eyewitnesses to try and respond to the burning question: what exactly happened in Garabandal? Why was it all so quickly ignored, silenced, and forgotten? Has it really been studied? If it is real, why hasn't it been approved? Thousands of apparitions, miracles, huge graces of conversion, and like an unstoppable waterfall, Our Lady of Mount Carmel of Garabandal continues to pour upon the world her blessing. The Mother of God and our Mother wants her children to return to her Son before it's too late.
Soy el Padre José Luis Saavedra.
My name is Father José Luis Saavedra. I earned a doctorate in historical theology from the University of Navarra.
Bueno, soy Jorge Fernández Díaz. Soy ingeniero industrial.
I'm Jorge Fernández Díaz. I'm an industrial engineer and labor inspector, but I've spent my whole life, the past 40 years, in politics.
Yo me llamo Ángel María Rojas.
My name is Ángel María Rojas. I entered the Jesuits over 62 years ago and have been a priest for over 50 years now.
Soy Javier Paredes, catedrático de Historia
Contemporánea. I'm Javier Paredes, professor of contemporary history in the Public University in Madrid. So, I obviously examine the apparitions of Garabandal from a historical viewpoint.
In each of the apparitions, the message God permits Our Lady to give, or that God Himself gives through her, offers the Church a concrete form of support for the times, the society, the historical moment she's living. Lourdes was the struggle against rationalism. Our Lady asked Bernadette to drink mud and eat grass. The people were scandalized when they saw that. And now, 5 or 6 million people visit Lourdes every year. Fatima, the struggle against communism, the destruction weakened by an ideology turned totalitarianism, extinguished millions of lives. In Garabandal, the message is even more powerful.
Bueno, creo que el momento en el que...
Well, I'd say the moment Our Lady comes here to San Sebastián de Garabandal is what I consider a very special moment in the history of the Church. There's no doubt about it.
Garabandal coincided with the Second Vatican Council. Garabandal began in 61 and ended in 65. The council began later, but ended the same year.
Vatican II, from 62 to 65, and Our Lady is here, meanwhile, appearing and giving messages that when you know what was being said in the council, what was later known as the spirit of Vatican II, you understand why this historical moment was chosen.
The 19th century saw the triumph of an idea that had made its way down the centuries ever since Luther's rupture with the Church. The idea of the autonomous self. Man as an autonomous being that can make up his own laws for himself. This is exactly what happened in the late 19th, early 20th century within the Church.
De hecho, Juan Pablo II, en una de sus
In fact, John Paul II, in one of his most important encyclicals, Veritatis Splendor, numbers 4 and 5, speaks of an immense crisis in the Church, and seminaries and theological departments that had strayed from church doctrine. In the 10 years that followed Vatican II, 17,000 priests left the priesthood, and 25,000 men and women religious abandoned the consecrated life.
This is concretely evident in the vocations crisis. Up until 1964, there was usually an average of 8,100 to 8,200 major seminarians in Spain. In 1964, the number dropped to 1,000 and remained little more than 1,000.
The crisis that followed Vatican II was incredible. Incredible.
In 62, exactly when Vatican II opened, the Cuban Missile Crisis arose between the United States and the Soviet Union over the installation of Soviet missiles in Fidel Castro's Cuba. That was October of 62. We know that they were at the brink of war, awaiting orders. Meanwhile, the red telephone of ongoing correspondence between Kennedy and Khrushchev, etc. They were moments of extraordinary significance, given the serious risk of nuclear war that ensued.
Los que conozcan Garabandal.
Let's go back to 1961. Those who've seen Garabandal can go back in time and imagine the town of San Sebastián de Garabandal without even a paved road for cars, with practically illiterate girls that did not understand many of the things Our Lady told them. Why would Our Lady tell a group of girls things they couldn't understand, but they could pass on? Because Garabandal is an apparition for us all.
Pues yo soy David Toribio Cosío, nací el año 1935 en San Sebastián de Garabandal y allí viví casi toda mi vida.
Yo soy Celina, nací en San Sebastián de Garabandal y tengo 83 años, o sea que nací el 23 de octubre del 35.
Yo soy Maximina González, hermana de la madre de Conchita, tía de Conchita y madrina.
Soy José Román Serrano Martínez. En su día estuve en Garabandal en el año 61, era veinteañero. Mi padre tuvo la fortuna de llegar a Garabandal a través de un buen amigo, Eustaquio Cuenca. Y bueno, de alguna manera se llegó a un acuerdo entre ellos de decir, oye, ¿por qué no va tu hijo a dar unas clases por allí, estos chavales? Pasan un fenómeno, un mes o 2 meses allí, en el verano entero.
El pueblo no se parece nada hoy a como era entonces. Entonces había muchos pedruscos, muchas piedras, charcos, desigualdad del terreno. Era complicado andar por el pueblo en aquel tiempo.
Allí me preguntan a veces, me dicen, ¿allí fuiste al colegio? Digo, allí hice las carreras detrás de las ovejas, al colegio muy poco. Cuando nevaba, que no podíamos salir al campo a trabajar, entonces íbamos, que eran fiestas para nosotros.
Pues casi todo el trabajo era al 100% ganadería. vacas, caballos, ovejas.
Como todos trabajábamos al campo, el primero que terminaba de meter la hierba, ahora por ejemplo, en este tiempo, iba a ayudar al que iba el último. Siempre andábamos así.
En casi todas las casas oía usted que en las cocinas se estaban rezando el rosario. Yo me recuerdo de mis padres, yo recé mucho y me hacía la dormida a veces para no rezar el rosario en casa. Pero era un pueblo muy súper religioso, un pueblo muy bonito era, muy bonito era.
Yo tenía 26 años y cuando empezaron las apariciones, que empezaron el 18 de junio de 1961.
That day, 4 girls, Mariloli, Jacinta, Maricruz, and Conchita, were playing in the village, taking apples from a neighbor's tree, when all of a sudden they heard thunder.
They looked out toward the surrounding valleys, but there was no sign of a storm brewing. The same thing happened at the beginning of Fatima and Lourdes. Both Sister Lucia and Bernadette speak of thunder. The girls were there feeling bad for what they had done and interpreted the thunder as a sign from God. Then, all of a sudden, one of them fell to her knees. She looked upward into the sky, and her face turned pale like wax. One of them was just about to go find that girl's mother when the 3 other girls suddenly fell to their knees too and started having the same vision. It was an angel, and without saying a word, he filled them with awe. When they came out of the ecstasy, bewildered and in silence, they decided to go running to the church. On the way, another girl stopped them and asked, "What have you been up to?" They responded, "We've seen an angel." They went running to tell the teacher. The teacher was so amazed that she told them, "Let's see if this continues in the next 2 or 3 days." She clearly trusted her pupils, knowing that they were normal girls and what had happened might very well be possible.
The next day, the parish priest, Father Valentin, spoke with them separately, without finding any differences in their testimonies. That afternoon, they went back to the calleja on their own. They prayed the rosary, but nothing happened, and they went home without having had any vision.
That night, on their way to bed, the 4 of them, each in her own home, heard a voice saying, "Don't worry, you'll see me again."
Los primeros días fueron la cosa más maravillosa del mundo.
Y primero yo decía, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Qué está pasando? Claro, ya me entró la curiosidad de verlas.
Rezaban el rosario y al terminar el rosario era cuando tenían el éxtasis y se quedaban rígidas. No las podíamos mover del sitio, ni un dedo, ni mover un dedo, ni nada.
Pues venía gente que no creía en las apariciones y le hacían daño a las niñas. Las pinchaban. Le metían unos focos por los ojos porque no pestañearon nunca. Las niñas nunca pestañearon, siempre miraban al cielo con los ojos abiertos. Entonces las madres vinieron donde nosotros llorando por el amor de Dios, cuidar de nuestras niñas que las están maltratando. Entonces a partir de ahí, nosotros los mozos, que éramos unos 20, pues las cuidábamos, andábamos con ellas. Y fue maravilloso porque nos enterábamos prácticamente de todo.
The parish priest was taking note of all that occurred, and he said that by the 4th or 5th day, 600 people had come to see the girls in ecstasy. On Sundays, there were up to 3,000. You could only get there after an hour-long uphill climb because it was impossible by car. There were no bathrooms, there was barely electric lighting, no paved roads, and even so, there were crowds. The fact that so many people were there is proof in itself of what they were seeing.
On July 1st, the angel announced a very special visit that would take place the following day. That day, July 2nd, 1961, the Blessed Virgin Mary would appear to them as Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Me llamo Juan Hervás y soy doctor en medicina y especialista en pediatría.
My name is Juan Hervás, and I'm a physician and specialist in pediatrics. I earned my medical degree at the School of Medicine in Valencia, Spain, and then did postgraduate studies in the United States in 2 schools, Einstein in New York and Harvard in Boston. For me, Garabandal is truly a milestone among Marian apparitions from a medical standpoint. Just the number of doctors that went to Garabandal and studied the girls is amazing. But I'd start off by saying something about the protagonists. The protagonists of Garabandal are 4, 11, and 12-year-old girls who lived in a remote corner of northern Spain in a mountainous area, and due to this isolation, probably had an inferior psychological age, perhaps 8 or 9 years of age psychologically speaking. They are reported to have had between 2,000 or 3,000 apparitions, accompanied by quite prolonged ecstasies, lasting up to even 6 or 7 hours. All this, along with extraordinary visible phenomena, sparked interest among many physicians and theologians.
Por eso, en el cuadro que se llama La Calleja, pusieron maderas por arriba y por abajo para que no entraran a tocarlas. Intentaron moverlas muchos.
Yo personalmente intenté elevarlas, cogerlas, las asilas y levantarlas estando en éxtasis, y bueno, imposible.
Salían de la iglesia en éxtasis y tenían que subir a La Calleja, debajo de los pinos. Entonces los mozos teníamos que ir uno por un lado, otro por otro, y unos delante y otros detrás. Era una sensación rara.
Corriendo, y de vez en cuando, pues, ¡pas!, pegaban un giro, porque por la calleja de no sé qué, por la calleja de no sé cuál, hasta que en algún momento empezaban a correr de tal manera que levantaban los brazos en cruz y parecía que en lugar de correr volaban a una velocidad tremenda. Nosotros no éramos capaces de seguirlas. O sea, a esa velocidad había momentos en que de vez en cuando ¡pas!, pegaban un frenazo en seco. Y nosotros, en lugar de frenar, lo que hacíamos era salir todos disparados porque no podíamos frenar en seco. Y luego, con los brazos en cruz, cogían carrería otra vez hacia atrás, a la misma velocidad que corrían y volaban hacia adelante. Y luego eso se trasladó ya, y en lugar de hacerlo en el pueblo nada más, corrían monte arriba. Y de noche corrían monte arriba, todos con luces, con linternucas, como pudiéramos y tal. Y por aquellos andurriales, pues te pegabas unos porrazos tremendos, te caías 20.000 veces. Ellas nada. Por allí subían a los pinos, bajaban, daban un recorrido por todos los lados y al final acababan en casa. Y claro, en esas correrías, pues mucha gente se dejaba los zapatos o lo que fuera. Y bueno, tanto es así que en algún momento, en casa de Conchita dijo a Serafín, a su hermano: oye, que me dice la señora que ha perdido el zapato no sé qué, vete a tal sitio que ahí está. ¿Qué dices? De noche. Que sí, que vete, no sé qué. Mira, pegando a la cuadra de no sé quién, ahí arriba, antes de llegar a los pinos tal, ahí está. Y Serafín, el bueno de hombre, pues corría y hacía lo que decía su hermana, y bajaba con el zapato.
The girls entered into a trance, an altered state of consciousness with the loss of sensory activity. The phenomena began with a very abrupt hyperextension in the neck. They fell to their knees. If they were all together, they would fall together at the same time. The fall was something impossible.
Y son unas piedras tremendas que, bueno, que al caer de rodillas, ¡pas!, se oían los porrazos, y sin embargo, al levantarse, miraba las rodillas y estaban intactas, y no tenía ni moratones, ni ninguna rojez, nada de nada.
They lost all sense of touch and pain, so they could be pinched, burned.
Ando de rodillas allí, las metían agujas esas de coser sacos de aquella época que tenían la punta, digamos, curvada para coser sacos, y allí que sin ningún problema despinchaban.
Pero que ellas...
But the girls didn't feel a thing.
A German engineer named Maximo Forschler appeared on the scene. He lived in Santander and somehow heard about Garabandal. This man told us, "I am Protestant and technically do not believe in the Virgin Mary. But I don't understand what's happening there. They are 11 and 12-year-old girls, weak, small, from a town in the middle of nowhere." He was very strong and said to himself, "I could pick up one of those girls with one hand. But when they are in ecstasy, I can't even make them budge." Moreover, the girls appeared relaxed with fluid movements, and among themselves, they were perfectly capable of moving one another. But I can't even move one of their hands. The prior of the Trappist monastery was a strong man, and we were both there together. We tried moving or raising one of the girl's arms during an ecstasy, and it was impossible. Not only were we unable to lift them, between the two of us, we couldn't even move a muscle. What's more, we observed that the girl made no effort. She was relaxed. I can't explain.
Por ejemplo, un señor de Madrid, un muchacho de Madrid, joven, no, de Barcelona, pues se arrimó a Simón, el padre de Jacinta, y le dice: "Simón, yo no creo en estas apariciones. Bueno, yo no creo en estas apariciones ni creo nada. Ando muy mal espiritualmente." Y le dice Simón a este joven: "Mire usted, la niña de la izquierda es mi niña. Yo le doy permiso para que vaya usted allá y la toque, la levante, o haga lo que quiera. Yo soy su padre y le doy permiso." Fue este mozo de Jacinta, se pone a levantarla y no pudo. Y volvió y le dice: "Simón, no he podido levantarla." Eso me parecía a mí, dice él. Termina la aparición y le dice Simón a Jacinta: "Jacinta, este señor te quiso levantar cuando estabas hablando con la Virgen. ¿Quieres ponerte de rodillas para que te levante ahora?" Se pone la niña de rodillas, lo al mozo, y la levantó. "Ahora creo en Garabandal, ahora creo en Dios. Ay, gracias a Dios. Ahora creo en todo." No, es que es impresionante.
All that occurred in Garabandal from those first days onwards is utterly mind-blowing. Levitations, returning of religious objects kissed by Our Lady. The girl had hundreds of medals and rosaries that Pepe Diaz said got all tangled up. She would take them one at a time and hand them back to their owners without effort. A woman once gave her several medals, hers, her husband's, her son's, and her daughter-in-law's. Our Lady kissed each one, but the girl didn't give them back to the woman. Without having seen where they came from, she placed each of the 4 medals on the right person. She said, "What more do I need to see?" Then, crying in front of everyone, said, "It is impossible that she could guess whose they were or which medal belongs to each of us without looking at the medals." Our Lady made herself manifest, letting the people get a glimpse of something which attracted more and more people. People went home talking about it, and others started coming from even farther away.
Soy Román Martínez del Cerro García de Blanes. Conocí Garabandal fundamentalmente a través de 2 jesuitas, Lorenzo Lacabe y el padre Ramón María Andreu. Tenía entonces 15 años y mi padre era catedrático en el mismo instituto. Con un pequeño 600 que teníamos, nos vinimos a ver a Garabandal. Dejamos el coche en Cosío. Era imposible subir desde Cosío a Garabandal porque era una pista forestal llena de barro y imposible, pero encontramos un Land Rover que nos subió a Garabandal. Entonces la primera que yo viví directamente, a mí me gusta sobre todo hablar personalmente de lo que yo he vivido. Me han contado, sé mucho, he leído, pero yo lo que de verdad viví es lo que más me gusta transmitir porque lo hago de primera mano. Mariloli tenía aviso por la tarde, por la noche, y nos fuimos a la taberna o tienda que tenía su padre. Nos sentamos allí, tenían la escalera a mano derecha entrando, después una barra y no había sitio, habíamos 10 o 12 personas y yo me senté en un saco en una esquina de esa tienda esperando esos avisos que la Mariloli podía tener. Pasaban las horas y yo estaba, después del viaje además estaba reventado, me quedé dormido, mi padre se quedó dormido y todos estuvimos. Y más o menos sobre las 3 de la madrugada, de pronto yo me despierto, ruido, ya. Salimos todos corriendo y pasó la barra en la parte del fondo y Mariloli se había caído en éxtasis en la cocina. Se había oído, fue impresionante el ruido de las rodillas en el suelo. Eso fue impresionante. Salimos todos a verlo. Yo tenía 15 años, yo iba más de curiosidad que otra cosa. A mí me pasó que cuando yo vi a la niña se transfiguraba. O sea, la niña se embellecía, pero una cosa increíble. La niña era una niña normal y corriente y de pronto era otra. Más bien pálida, con una sonrisa y con una cosa fuera de lo natural. Y a mí eso me impresionó tanto que me empecé a temblar y no era capaz de controlarme y lo pasé fatal. Pero fatal porque yo no sabía si me iba a caer o qué me pasaba. Nadie se me hacía caso porque todo el mundo estaba pendiente de la niña y yo era el que menos pintaba allí. Y en ese momento yo pues me dirigí a la Virgen y le pedí por favor que me quitara aquel temblor. Me lo quitó y desde ese momento empecé a disfrutar. Perdón. Bueno, desde ese momento empecé a disfrutar de lo que era la presencia de la Virgen en una presa. Entonces, hay veces que me preguntan, ¿cuándo de verdad pensó que la Virgen estaba presente allí? Desde ese momento. Hay 2 momentos del Evangelio que a mí me recuerdan mucho aquello. La transfiguración en el Monte Tabor, la sensación de que Virgen está aquí, la sentimos todas. Y la otra, la alegría de, por ejemplo, la visita de la Virgen a su prima Santa Isabel. Esa alegría y ese bienestar fueron en todas las apariciones. Y sobre todo desde ese momento.
Sadly, these events were not well received by all. They were strongly resisted by many intellectuals. This occurred with the so-called First Episcopal Commission, which visited the village only 3 times over the course of the entire first year of the apparitions. The day Our Lady appeared for the first time, the entire commission was present. Father Francisco Odriozola, secretary of the commission, along with 2 other priests and 2 doctors, Dr. Piñal and Dr. Morales.
The commission said everything was going to end then and there. But they never studied the extraordinary events taking place. Dr. Morales never returned to the village. Years later, in a conference, he explained, "That was the only time I visited the village, yet my negative reports led to Garabandal's condemnation." The commission didn't return until late July, when they tried to take the girls in the middle of the night. The families refused, all except Conchita's. They took her with them to Santander for 8 days. Her therapy consisted in taking her to the beach, the fair, keeping her busy so she wouldn't think about the apparitions.
Y yo fui con su madre a Santander, a casa de este sacerdote, a buscar a Conchita. Yo vi, Conchita le mandaban que si no lo negaba, a ella la llevarían a un manicomio y a los padres a la cárcel. Entonces ella, hartándose de amenazarla, ella dijo, bueno, pues lo mío no será verdad, pero lo de las otras al mejor sí. Muy bien, Conchita, la palmearon porque ya lo había negado.
The day after Conchita returned from Santander, the theologians and doctors of the commission met with those in the town who were interested in the apparitions. There were doctors and priests who were studying them on their own. A numerous group congregated in front of the church, according to Dr. Ortiz, a pediatrician from Santander who'd spent over 50 days studying the ecstasies. Just imagine if a doctor spent 15 minutes visiting an average patient, what it meant for a pediatrician to have traveled 90 kilometers from Santander to study the ecstasies for 52 days straight, spending time in the town. This man had an enormous amount of information on the apparitions. When the theologians and doctors of the commission showed Dr. Ortiz the paper and said, "Look, the girl has denied it all. This is over." His reply was, "But how do you explain the levitations that I have scientifically proven with that signature? I'll have you know that I passed my arm underneath the girl. I mean, it is the simplest of tests. Tell me how she did it." "Nah, that was epilepsy." His reply? "Well, that girl certainly does some mighty high jumping, doesn't she?" The signature was that of a 12-year-old girl who had barely ever left her hometown, placed under enormous pressure. We're not implying that there were bad intentions. However, it is not easy to understand what really took place in Garabandal without going to the documentary sources we have today. There were things in which some people have a serious responsibility, and placing all that in the light of truth would imply taking seriously events that have perhaps never been examined objectively.
In spite of the contradictions, the events continued. On July 2nd, in secret, Our Lady had given the girls a message that they were to make public on October 18th.
As the date drew near, pilgrims began to arrive in town. There were thousands. The town was more crowded than ever. In fact, the pilgrims endured a day of rain, hail, and even snow in the afternoon.
Sí. Me acuerdo del día lluvioso, porque en mi casa había gente y traían unos zapatos muy bonitos. Y entonces, como estaban muy mojadas, entraron en mi cocina y los metieron al horno a secarlos. Y estábamos hablando y se nos olvidaron los zapatos. Y entonces se le quemaron los zapatos, eran marquesas o no sé qué eran, sí.
Se leyó en los pinos, lloviendo, llovía a mares.
Our Lady asked the girls to present it to the parish priest in front of the church, and they were to read it there, and then in the pines. The message was to be read by the parish priest, Father Valentin Marichara.
However, the commission pressured the priest to do things differently. The message was not made public in front of the church. It was not read by the parish priest either. It was announced that only the girls would read it in the pines.
There are very powerful testimonies. There's a woman that talks about how they trudged through the mud, pushing and shoving to try to find a good place. When it was finally announced, the message will be made public, the people climbed up to the pines, but it was definitely a sight to see. People slipping and falling, pushing and shoving. And she said, "The most remarkable thing is that no one was mortally injured. There were thousands trying to find a good place. I was about 60 meters from the girls. Of course, I could barely hear anything, but when it was time for the message, the entire situation overcame me."
I must make many sacrifices, do much penance, and visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently. But first, we must lead good lives. If we do not, a chastisement will befall us. The cup is already filling up. And if we do not change, a very great chastisement will come upon us.
She insists on what her message in Fatima said. World War I was well underway when Our Lady came to Fatima and said that wars were the result of men's sins, and therefore conversion was necessary. So in Garabandal, the same occurred. What does the first message say? That the chalice is filling with sins, with the offenses to God being committed, and that if we do not repent, if we do not beg forgiveness, if we do not make sacrifices, if we do not pray, a chastisement will come. She announced the chastisement in that moment.
The message, in fact, speaks of a chastisement. Previously, there had been talk of a miracle, but only to the girls. From that moment, it became an important part of Garabandal, an especially intense corrective for a particularly difficult moment in history. However, the message was not understood that day. They said, all this preparation for such an insignificant message on sacrifices and visiting the Blessed Sacrament? We already know all that. A great chastisement will befall us if we do not change? We knew that. The visionaries in the years following the apparitions have always said what's most important, what should be the focal point, are the messages. What heaven wanted to do there, the reason behind all these extraordinary phenomena, was to turn our attention to what heaven was trying to tell us in those messages.
The failure of the first message was a setback for Garabandal. Many had expected something extraordinary, which is why, in spite of so many phenomena, many rejected the apparitions from that moment on.
However, the girls with all this dissonance regarding the apparitions started insisting that Our Lady had to grant them a miracle. Do a miracle, even if it's just a tiny one, like making us fly or turning the day into night. Whatever it takes so the people believe, so they can know you're here. Our Lady did not usually respond. She was even saddened at times and told them, they'll believe later on. However, one day the angel told them, God is going to work a miracle through you and me. On July 18th, when you receive communion, many times he had brought it to them in a mystical, spiritual manner. That day, the Eucharist will be visible to all those who are in the town.
Ella creía que se veía siempre, vaya, y le llamaban el milagruco. Y ya cuando dijeron que iba a ser el 18 de julio, creo que era, pues toda la gente que estaba allí por la mañana ya estaba, el pueblo creo que estaba abarrotado, creo porque yo casi no lo veía.
The police estimated there was somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 people in the town that day.
Aquello fue pasando el día, coincidió que había baile, estaba tirando hasta cohetes, ya no se sabía si por el baile la Virgen vendría o no, y un poco la desesperación de todos de que no se producía el milagro que todos queríamos ver.
Pero venía una prima mía, ay, qué gordísima va a ser, ay, Dios mío, va a pasar algo muy gordo, porque aquí se siente la gente engañada, porque dice que no hay derecho, porque... Y le digo yo, Angelina, a ver, mira, ven, mira la cara de Conchita. Mira qué cara tiene Conchita. Digo, con estar viéndole la cara a ella, ¿tú te crees que tiene cara de preocupada? De que ha metido una mentira tan gorda y eso, yo nada más que hacía estar allí y ver a Conchita.
Y ya, pues bueno, ¿qué le vamos a hacer? Dios quiere esto, pues con resignación nos fuimos ya para dormir a nuestra casa. Y en el momento que estábamos en la calle, oímos un revuelo enorme.
Y entonces ya los que estaban más cerca empezaron, ya están éxtasis, que están éxtasis, y claro, y nada más casi estar en éxtasis sale, y se da la vuelta, yo ya me la perdí entonces porque resulta que la gente se abalanzó detrás de ella y yo digo que pisamos a la gente.
Cogí una linterna potente, yo estaba pegado a ella prácticamente y enchufándole con la linterna, prácticamente metida la linterna en la boca. Ella abrió la boca, sacó la lengua, no tenía absolutamente nada. Y de repente apareció un punto.
Saca la lengua y empezó a formarse una cosa blanca, 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 muy blanca, mucho más blanca que la nieve.
Se fue agrandando en forma de espiral.
Era como una moneda de 10 duros, decía yo entonces, y así la sacaba todo lo que podía. Y yo vi después cómo se le iba aguando hacia alrededor cuando ya se le estaba deshaciendo. Y hasta que la tragó.
Someone asked Benjamin Gomez, are you sure she didn't have it in her pocket and she put it on her tongue, or she already had it in her mouth? Look, I was 20 centimeters away. It would have been impossible. She was well observed.
No estaba a una distancia, no, estaba pegado a ella. Pero eso, ¿quién ha dicho que la tenía en los brazos, en las manos? No, hombre, es que es una barbaridad. O sea, es que la lengua estaba totalmente limpia, y de repente apareció un punto blanco, un punto, nada más que un punto, en la lengua. ¿Dónde se dio ese punto?
La impresión esa tan fuerte, yo no la he tenido en mi vida. Yo decía, gracias Señor, ahora sí que estoy segura de que existes, empezaba yo. Yo me he enterado después que alguno de ellos, que después que como que no lo creía después que había sido eso cierto lo que había visto.
2 negative witnesses visited the town the next day. One of them was there that same night, a man named Jose Antonio Giuliani. who had not seen the little miracle. He didn't make it to the immediate vicinity on the street where it occurred. Standing at a distance, he asked someone, "Did you see it?" "No." "Did you?" "I didn't either." "Then it must all be fake. Everything is made up. It's nighttime, it's dark out, complications, the girls are clever, we've been tricked." Thus, word spread that they had been fooled, that everything was fake, but that man hadn't seen anything really. Another man, as Conchita tells in her diary, went to the bishop's office in Santander. He was a Franciscan priest named Father Justo. He testified that everything had been fake. A few days later, however, he sent a group of fellow Franciscans from his community to apologize to the visionaries. He sent word, "Look, I don't know why I did it. I was upset." These individuals saw nothing, and yet their testimony proved highly detrimental. From September 1962 onwards, they make clear reference to the warning, the miracle, and the chastisement.
The warning, as understood in Garabandal, will be visible worldwide, a grace from God for each one of us.
I think it is a manifestation of God's mercy.
If we stop and think about it, the biggest favor God can do us in this world is permit us to see the state of our soul and when we're headed if we die, right?
The grace of the warning will be as though time had stopped, and everyone could see their soul for just an instant as God sees it.
All the good we've done, all the good we've left undone, and all the wrong we've done, it's something meant to trigger our conversion.
Conchita said, "After the warning, we will weep seeing how much God loves us."
Loli knew the date of the warning and said it would come at a time when Spain and the world needed it.
She spoke of a church that would seem to have disappeared. They often spoke of communism.
Spain would be in a bad state. I asked her, worse off than it is now? And she said yes, worse.
Everyone will know that it comes from God, although some will try to deny it.
There will be an intent to distort things. So the Lord turns to us. How? With the miracle. To help us believe that what you've lived is for real, as you've perceived it, not as others are trying to tell you.
The little miracle of the visible host is in contrast with the great miracle she started announcing, beginning in the fall of 62, in which she said there would be an enormous miracle even greater than the miracle of the sun in Fatima. And why a miracle? She asked Jesus the following year. In a locution, the Lord responded to her, "Lord, is it to convert many? No, Conchita. It's to convert the entire world."
The miracle is so powerful, so impressive, that without a special grace, it would kill you. Like it claimed the life of Father Andreu. He died of happiness, but he died.
I say there are two people who have seen the miracle. One was Father Luis Maria Andreu.
He's known as the fifth visionary of Garabandal. All of a sudden, when the girls were in ecstasy, he appeared in their field of vision. The people in the pines during the ecstasy heard him shout, repeating the same word 4 times, "Miracle." That night, returning in a jeep with those who had accompanied him, he commented, "Our Lady is so wonderful. She loves us so much. What a great mother we have in heaven. Today is the happiest day of my life." He fell asleep and never woke up. This priest was a little over 30, young, healthy. Everyone was left dumbfounded because he had suddenly died the day he had seen the miracle of Garabandal.
Hay otra persona que ha visto el milagro. San Pío de Pietrelcina.
There's another person who's seen the miracle, St. Pio of Pietrelcina. Father Pellegrino, who said, "I was the last spiritual son to be accepted by Padre Pio during his earthly life." Prior to his death, Padre Pio told him he had seen the miracle. We also know that Padre Pio requested that the veil used to cover his face be given to Conchita 3 days after his death.
This miracle, the testimony of those who experienced the miracle, in addition to this sign, is very important. Garabandal will become a pilgrimage site for people worldwide. And that's when we'll understand what Our Lady meant when she said, The miracle of Garabandal is meant to convert the entire world.
What Our Lady is saying in Garabandal, as she says in Fatima and everywhere, is convert, convert, convert. Prayer, prayer, prayer. Sacrifice. So if there's no conversion, a chastisement will come.
The girls saw that chastisement. They saw it in the so-called Night of the Screams. One day, Our Lady forbade everyone from going up to the pines.
Solamente una niña pequeñita que tenía 6 o 7 años. Pero la gente subió al final de las casas y de allí las oíamos. Y unos gritos, ¡ay, Virgen Santísima! ¡Ay, Madre! A los niños no, a los niños no.
Yo esa noche pensé que era el fin del mundo, lo tenía totalmente creído. Entonces, porque ellas gritaban y decían que no venga, llévanos junto a ti. Hablaban mucho de la confesión, que se confiesen todos primero, que no venga, que se confiesen todos primero.
El miedo que tenían las niñas allá arriba, viendo todo lo que vieron, se transmitía a nosotros. Con oírlas aquella noche, solamente con oírlas.
Everything indicates that it was the revelation of the chastisement and the circumstances surrounding the warning. Apparently, a situation of intense persecution for the church and great difficulties in the world. The girls asked, "What will this be called?" Our Lady said that it would be called communism.
Yo estaba con la boca abierta porque había allí un franciscano que se quedaba aquí en mi casa.
Entonces José Manuel, un chico del pueblo, vio a este sacerdote. Padre, padre, rece, rece, que estamos perdidos. Rezaba, cuando rezaba aquel padre, las niñas callaban. Venía una paz inmensa y percibías esa paz. Pero el padre se cansaba de rezar y volvían otra vez. Callaba la boca, porque él también quería oír y quería hablar con la gente, quería enterarse de cosas y dejaba de rezar.
Y era la víspera del Corpus. Y el día del Corpus fue un día precioso. Unas confesiones, unas comuniones, una procesión del Corpus con el Santi.
It's a pity that so many people, when they hear about Garabandal, right away think, what about the warning, the miracle, and the chastisement? Why don't we take a look at everything else? Because if we heed Our Lady's messages in everything else, there won't be a chastisement, which is something she said. Perhaps a chastisement will come if mankind does not convert. But Our Lady came to say much more. The message of Garabandal encompasses far more. It's as if we were to study the gospel, giving utmost importance to the words in those days and those words alone. When will those days be? What will they be like? Come on, you have to read the entire gospel. Live the gospel. Don't you worry about those days. In fact, you'll probably die beforehand. Live what the church tells us, which means living what Garabandal tells us.
The people worry a lot about the warning, the chastisement, and the miracle, and they don't worry about the message. Lead good lives. Less and less importance is given to the Eucharist. Meditate on Jesus' passion. That's what's important in Garabandal.
The apparitions began to come to an end. In January of 1963, the girls stopped seeing Our Lady. Only Conchita would see her again, although she'd have to wait until nearly 2 years later. On December 8th, 1964, Our Lady announced that she had a new message for the world.
Everyone remembered the crisis caused by the first message in 1961. And now that there was even more division, another message was announced by only one of the visionaries. The date was approaching and everyone expected something. In fact, more people than ever arrived in the town. The newspaper accounts from those days are amazing. A journalist from Barcelona, Juan Pac Soler, wrote, "We went up at 5 a.m. When I got to the town, I saw people sleeping on their doorsteps and their haylofts. I started writing to send something to the newspaper. Meanwhile, 2 English women next to me fell asleep with their heads resting on their elbows. The town was overflowing with people. There were between 12,000 to 15,000 people. No one knows exactly how many people were in the town that day. The afternoon went on, and there was no ecstasy. Then the girls announced that the ecstasy would be in the Quadro. The people tried to find a good place, to get up close to the place of the ecstasy. It was amazing. It lasted about 12 minutes. They could hear the girls mutter a few words and could see her laugh and cry. It's curious to note that Our Lady did not give the message herself. A few months later, Our Lady said, "You know why I didn't come on June 18th to give you the message? It was because I felt bad having to tell you those things. But you needed to know them for your own good. And if you obey them, for God's greater glory."
As my message of October 18th has not been fulfilled and has not been made known to the world, I tell you that this is my last message. Before, the cup was filling up. Now it is overflowing. Many cardinals, many bishops, and many priests are on the road to perdition and are taking many souls with them. Less and less importance has been given to the Eucharist. You should turn the wrath of God away from yourselves by your efforts. If you ask for his forgiveness with sincere hearts, he will forgive you. I, your mother, through the intercession of St. Michael the Archangel, ask you to amend your lives. You are now receiving the last warnings. I love you very much and do not want your condemnation. Pray to us with sincerity and we will grant your requests. You should make more sacrifices. Meditate on the Passion of Jesus.
So, look, I hear that in Spain there are some illiterate girls saying that many cardinals, many bishops, and many priests are on the road to perdition and are taking many souls with them.
Van por el camino de la perdición y con ellos arrastran a muchas almas. Sí, lo recuerdo. Obispos, que no dijo cardenales, porque era la palabra muy dura. En público, por no decir, porque es una palabra muy dura. Sacerdotes, obispos y cardenales van por el camino de la perdición y con ellos arrastran a muchas almas. Sí, lo vi.
Nos pareció muy fuerte. Y también las niñas lloraron muchísimo, no querían decirlo. Y las madres no querían decirlo. Ay, Dios mío, pero ¿cómo vamos a decir esto? Si los curas son santos, ay, Dios mío, ay. Pero la Virgen les obligó a decirlo.
Ten en cuenta que estamos hablando del año 61, 62, 65. La guerra española terminó en el 39. En la guerra española murieron miles de sacerdotes por defender su fe, sacerdotes y obispos. Entonces, a la altura que uno tenía un sacerdote, era de un santo que no podía uno dudar lo más mínimo, ni nadie dudaba de la santidad del sacerdote.
Ahí se ve muy bien también la autenticidad de las apariciones. Si la Virgen no les hubiera empujado, no lo habrían dicho nunca las niñas ni sus madres por todo el oro del mundo. La Virgen les mandó, sí, es necesario que lo digáis.
Unfortunately, with the passing of time, and now in the present, we have made the painful discovery that many cardinals and many bishops and many priests were, in fact, on the road to perdition. The many cases are a devastating reality. If Our Lady's message had been heeded, that they were on the road to perdition, some would have changed paths, and we wouldn't have the situation we have now.
In an interview done 40 years after the apparitions, Bishop Duval commented, "The message of the apparition is theologically correct, interesting, important, and wholesome. What I cannot understand is why she would say that many priests, bishops, and cardinals are on the road to perdition. However, today we see and know what was taking place even back in the 60s, and we've all been devastated by it. and Garabandal, Our Lady announced the scandals that have later arisen within the Church to prepare us and help us live in such a way that we would not lose our faith in the midst of church scandals. Our Lady had said, "You have not made my message known. You have not lived the message, the Eucharist." Garabandal is an especially Eucharistic apparition. The message of the apparitions, from the first message on, the mystical communions, the little miracle, the second message, all make Our Lady's call to the Eucharist the focal point.
Our Lady is not just telling 4 girls in Garabandal. Less and less importance is being given to the Eucharist. She is telling each of us, hey, you, what importance do you give the Eucharist?
The phenomena ended with the last apparition on November 13th, 1965. After that, the girls left the village. Conchita went to Burgos, where she was received by Father Manuel Guerra and Mother Nieves García.
Cuando conocí a Conchita, estaba en Burgos de Superiora, con la casualidad de que yo no quería ya admitir a ninguna niña más porque el colegio estaba completo ya. Entonces, al poco tiempo viene la portera y me dice, hay una familia que pregunta, vino el capellán con ellos y entonces ya les dije que yo tenía un sitio. Y entonces ya me dijeron quién era Conchita, me explicaron y me pidieron que Conchita tuviera un confesor, que don Manuel se ofreció, y una persona que la formara, y me ofrecí yo. Por lo tanto, entró en el colegio como una niña más, con el nombre de María, para que nadie la molestara en nada. Todas las tardes llamaba a Conchita 1 hora o un par de horas a un recibidor. Todo lo que ella me dijo, la conversación, fue grabada inmediatamente cada vez que hablaba con ella, inmediatamente para no cambiar ni una sola palabra. Yo a Conchita entonces y después la he encontrado inmejorable. No he encontrado una persona ni más normal, sin ganas de llamar la atención de nadie. Cuando ella terminó las apariciones, le dijo a la Virgen que quería ser religiosa. Entonces nada más terminó las apariciones, se fue a un convento, se enteraron de que estaba allí porque ella fue a confesarse y le dijo, se conoce que al padre, le dijo, después se supo, pues que ella que había visto a la Virgen que tenía dudas algunas veces si era verdad, si no era verdad, si le parecía a ella que era ella. Y entonces el sacerdote, cuando se enteró que era Conchita, pues dijo, papá, va a decir usted la verdad enseguida. Vinieron 2 obispos y 2 sacerdotes. Alguna vez le dijeron, sí, pero eso te lo inventaste tú y yo. Sí, porque eso se inventa muchas veces la imaginación. Ah, pues sería, O sea que alguna vez, entre esa conversación tan larga que tuvieron, de 6 horas, ella alguna vez dijo, pues era verdad, claro, ante personas que te has imaginado tú, porque muchas veces pasa eso. Bien, entonces se marcharon con esa idea y entonces yo llamé al sacerdote que estuvo con ella, contrario, en Garabandal. Le llamé a Burgos, una vez que Conchita se marchó, y le dije, quería hablar con usted porque usted ha negado siempre las apariciones de Garabandal, concretamente en este caso que fue al convento y la tuvo usted 6 horas preguntándole. Y dice, no, 6 horas no, 5. Entonces le dije, bueno, pues muy bien, pues creo que está usted confundido porque esto no se puede hacer con una niña después de confesar y de esta manera. Cuando estos señores se marcharon de esa conversación que la pudo dejar aturdida, entonces ella tuvo una locución. En la locución del Señor, interiormente, le dijo, no quiero que estés aquí, quiero que estés fuera. Y Conchita, es que no me quieres, Señor. Y el Señor le dice, pero yo quiero que tú estés fuera, como diciendo, como mejor me puedes servir y como debes es fuera.
Up to this point, the story is very well known. What follows reveals what happened after the apparitions and why Garabandal has come up against so much resistance to being approved. In 1962, Bishop Baetzia rejected the apparitions. 5 years later, his successor, Bishop Buchol, affirmed that it had been a simple child's prank. His statement declared that everything had a natural explanation. Cirarda, his successor, said the same. After these three bishops in Santander came Bishop Juan Antonio del Val, who had formed part of the First Episcopal Commission, which is why he knew that the apparitions had not been properly studied. That's why he tried setting up a new commission 3 times, but without success. After 12 years of failed attempts, he was finally backed by Rome, and with the support of Cardinal Ratzinger, in 1989, finally established the Second Commission. We will now hear a few testimonies from that moment in history. Then we will hear a very important testimony from that Second Commission.
After the death of Padre Pio, the Holy See increases its interest in the events in the...
I'm Ed Kelly. I was born and raised in Seattle of elderly Irish-American Catholic parents. I spent a lot of time in Santander in 71, and in 72 spent 10 months here.
Pages, news, sensational, and documentary report.
The first years, they didn't write anything. I didn't find anything in the papers until after the girls made their declarations of uncertainty. Then on the front page of the local papers, all of them, no apariciones in Garabandal. Nothing. Everything has a natural explanation. And I read that, and the papers were stupid. I mean, there was so much that was so illogical. I talked to Bishop Del Val Gallo. He had just made his own pronouncement that said, my predecessors have judged that it wasn't certain whether the apparitions were of supernatural origin or not. I'm in communion with those bishops. I had written for him the statements of the evaluation from all of the previous official notes. I just had the part that gave the bishops evaluation of what happened. And he looked them over and he says, this one, the second note of Bishop Baetzia in 1965, this is the best statement on Garabandal and the one that conveys my opinion on it. And that was the note that had the statement of orthodoxy, that everything is in compliance with the traditional teaching of the Church, the real presence of the Blessed Sacrament, devotion to the Blessed Sacrament that is, and the Blessed Mother that's well known.
The commission interviewed Martin Lafrenière, a French priest present in Garabandal from the beginning of the studies of the apparitions. He was very surprised by the fact that they chose to interview him in a restaurant during a meal. He was even more surprised by the fact that every time he responded, note was taken, but in a tone that was most contrary to the apparitions. He was questioned, "Are you sure of that?" "Well, I'm not sure. Take note of that." He doubts about that. He realized that everything was being recorded as the opposite of what he meant to say. When the interview ended, an even bigger surprise awaited him when they told him, "Please sign here." And he said, "I'm not signing that." And right there in front of him, they wrote his first and last name in capital letters. Years later, some German friends of his visited the bishop's office to see how the case of the apparitions was proceeding, and they were informed that Martin Lafrenière had given a testimony against the apparitions, and that it was there in the bishop's office, signed by him. Obviously, he said, "What's that called in canon law? When they take your testimony, make it up, sign it, and present it as evidence in a case of discernment?" Obviously, in canon law, that's called falsification, because evidence that is null implies that a judgment must be restored in integrum according to canon law. It has to be. When the evidence is false, the judgment must be redetermined. It must be restudied. This is what those who studied the apparitions objectively witnessed time and again. they found that time and again everything was interpreted in the most negative way possible. And every time effort was made to move things in favor of the apparitions, there was drastic resistance.
The story of Menchu Mendiolea. Interesting. Menchu Mendiolea, the daughter of a well-known businessman who had a religious goods store. His daughter, Menchu, when she was 16, I believe, she told the story of her first sickness, a type of leukemia, and was in for tests at the main hospital, Valdecilla in Santander. And after doing everything possible, the doctors decided, no, we can't do anything more for her. Better for her to go home and be with her and die in the company of her family and friends, which she did. And they would pray for her. Well, someone came with a crucifix that had supposedly been kissed by the Blessed Virgin at Garabandal. And I think most people know that the girls reported that the Blessed Virgin told them, through articles kissed by me, my Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, will work prodigies and miracles. Crucifix, she venerated the crucifix, cured. Well, I guess by that time I had heard that someone from the Chancery went to Mr. Mendiolea and told him, please don't mention Garabandal with the cure of your daughter. It is not proper to connect apparitions which are false with a cure like this. So I went to talk to Mr. Mendiolea. And we talked. I says, is it true that someone came from the diocese to tell you not to mention it? Yes. Well,
from the same commission that studied the apparitions, not only was Menchu's cure not studied, but the very fact that she was cured was silenced, and the family was asked to remain silent about it. 10 years later, in 1975, Menchu was pregnant with her third son. 8 months into the pregnancy, she was diagnosed with the same illness, erythema. Her husband, Dr. Angel Alvarez, was a doctor in the Valdecilla hospital, where she had been hospitalized the first time. There, she spent a month doing all kinds of tests. As her husband was a doctor there, he had the entire hematology department studying his wife, including the department chief. They all studied her case, and in the end, the department chief, Dr. Zubizarreta, told her husband, Dr. Alvarez, "Look, it'll take a miracle to cure your wife. There's no hope of her getting better." On December 7th, Menchu's husband said, "Look, my wife was cured in Garabandal, and because we don't talk about the apparitions, the same things occurred again." He got in his car and went with his brother-in-law to the Pines. It was snowing. He climbed up the hill and prayed the rosary there. His brother-in-law didn't understand what was happening and said, "Look, there's nothing left to do for Menchu. Face up to it." They left, and when they got back in the car, he told him, "Menchu is cured, I'm sure of it." He went to the hospital and asked Dr. Zubizarreta to do another exam. Menchu's platelets had been at 500, and following the exam, they were over 20,000. In the days that followed, Menchu's second cure was confirmed. Menchu is a unique case. Our Lady of Garabandal is invoked twice, and Menchu was cured twice. I think I was about 20 years old when I heard a theologian and writer's comment on Garabandal. He said, "I can understand that the first commission failed, and that the bishop and the main doctor who had formed part of the commission admitted it. I can understand the girls denying it in front of Bishop Puchol with the pressure they were under. The girls denied the apparition under pressure. That's indisputable. But there was a second commission, and that second commission has resolved the case of Garabandal. Obviously, when I heard this theologian's comment, I had no counter-arguments. In fact, we hardly knew anything until last year. All of a sudden, after the premiere of Garabandal, Only God Knows, I opened my email and came across a message from a man I did not know, offering me the contact information for a member of the Second Commission.
Me llamo Javier Vildósola, estudié la carrera de Ciencias Políticas y Sociología en la Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Después hice un doctorado en Antropología Social y hace 30 años pues a mí me invitaron a participar en un estudio, trabajo de campo, en San Sebastián de Garabandal. Ni siquiera había oído hablar de ello. Y concretamente fue un antiguo profesor mío de la propia facultad, que se llamaba don Jesús María Vázquez, era padre dominico, y bueno, pues nos mandaron para allí. Ahora no me explicaron para qué íbamos exactamente, lo cual me resultaba bastante inconcebible, inverosímil, desde el momento en que uno de los aspectos que se enseñan en métodos y técnicas de investigación es la delimitación del campo de estudio. Resulta que aquí no había nada de nada. ¿Vais a ir aquí? ¿A qué? A pasar un cuestionario. Nunca entendí eso. Nunca lo entendí, a no ser que pensara mal, en el sentido de que yo tenía dudas sobre la intencionalidad de dichos cuestionarios, que nunca jamás en todos sus contenidos se refirieron a los acontecimientos acaecidos allí, y en cambio se preocupaban muchísimo de en fin, si había habido especulación económica, desarrollo urbanístico, etcétera, etcétera. Cuando llegué no sabía nada. Por la noche no dormía, me dedicaba a leer a toda velocidad, porque quería saber, pero bueno, ¿aquí qué ha pasado? ¿Qué es lo que ha ocurrido aquí? Y realmente es cuando empecé a ver que aquello no era muy normal, o sea, aquello se salía de lo corriente. De los 5 o 6 solamente hubo otro señor, como yo, que era un profesor de psicología evolutiva de la Universidad de Valladolid, Fernando Lara, un señor de psicología infantil. Aquí no están las videntes, y sobre todo no están las videntes cuando tenían la edad en que tuvieron las visiones. Si añadimos además que este señor era declaradamente, porque él mismo me lo dijo, era ateo, yo todavía entendía menos. Alguien me gustaría que me lo explicase, porque sigo sin entenderlo al cabo de 30 años. ¿Qué fue la primera comisión? La primera comisión no ha existido jamás. Luego, la segunda comisión, que es a la que se supone que yo pertenezco, tampoco existió jamás. A nosotros no se nos dijo, esto es una comisión. Se nos dijo que alguien del obispado, no se nos dijo quién exactamente, era quien había proporcionado el encargo, había dado el encargo y había proporcionado unos fondos para que fuéramos allí a pasar unos cuestionarios. Allí hubo varias personas que se supone que eran miembros de dicha comisión, eso sí, 2 veces comieron muy bien en Carmona. Yo fui a una de ellas y decidí que ya a las siguientes no iba.
When Vildósola met with the rest of the commission in Madrid without having performed a serious study on the apparitions, and they decided their conclusion would be that everything was a tactic for urban development, he resigned. He said, "This is unsustainable from a scientific viewpoint. We haven't studied the apparitions here. How are we going to present a conclusion about them?"
Yo dije ya al final, digo, bueno, yo no estoy de acuerdo en nada de esto que estoy escuchando. Aquí hemos ido a otra cosa. Es cuando a mí se me dijo que yo no era experto en... Dije, bueno, yo soy antropólogo y sí, los sistemas de creencias son de mi competencia por este tema, ¿no? Y entonces es cuando yo dije que iba a presentar, si se presentaba unas conclusiones como aquellas, elaboradas por unas personas, de las cuales solamente uno, Fernando Lara, había estado presente todos aquellos días, y otras 3 o 4 personas habían ido a comer a Carmona en 2 ocasiones, y eso sí, un día subieron a pasar los cuestionarios, esas personas no estaban en condiciones de decir nada. Es que yo sigo sin entender a qué fuimos. Por eso digo que si no hubo primera comisión, porque aquella primera comisión no fue seria, es que no ha habido tampoco segunda comisión.
I was left wondering, so has a study been done? What do we know about Garabandal? How can a genuine theologian today tell you that Garabandal has been studied just because there had been a second commission? Only when you learn this do you understand what Ratzinger said when he received the report on April 26, 1991.
In fact, the Second Commission's report was studied in the congregation presided by Cardinal Ratzinger. The future Pope responded in 1992 with a letter that would prove decisive in the story of the apparitions. In it, he affirmed that Rome had carefully examined all the reports from the Commission, showing interest in the case. Secondly, Ratzinger affirmed that Rome had decided not to intervene, although it could have. Thus, for the time being, the case should remain open. Lastly, Ratzinger suggested that the bishop affirm non constat, which implies uncertainty. Rome did not find sufficient reason to make a definitive judgment. The case was to remain open. From 1992 on, all the bishops and apostolic administrators of Santander have maintained Ratzinger's non constat. Considering the difficult process of the apparitions, no better solution was found for the time being. Since then, the apparitions have remained open to the faithful's own sensibility. That's why their stance could be a determining factor in contributing to the Church's favorable judgment.
More than 50 years have passed since the apparitions ended, and Garabandal still awaits a response. And we have a right to know what took place there.
Over 50 years later, Garabandal still awaits a response. Its message continues to be of absolute importance for all of us, for you. Because today, our mother continues to pour out her blessings in Garabandal.
Our Lady has remained faithful all the while, interceding in Garabandal with incredible strength. She has made a promise in this place, in this society, in this church we have today, with the needs we have, and now she's asking us to take a leap of faith that many are being tempted not to take.
I believe in Garabandal. I have no doubts. At all times, I shall willingly respect, obviously, what the Church determines. However, I would ask the Church, the hierarchy, to facilitate things so that as many members of the faithful as possible may visit. And in difficult moments like those we're living in, I think that instead of closing, what we should do is open our hands with mercy, so that as all the sons and daughters of the Church who desire to draw near to God may be adequately ministered to in a place that must have something, given the number of people it attracts, as is the case in Garabandal.
The Blessed Mother's commitment is made evident in the miracles, cures, and interior healings that take place today. It would be impossible to say all there is to say about the apparitions. There are so many people who are still moved to tears when they hear the message of Garabandal. So many messages of gratitude arrived with the making of Garabandal Only God Knows. So many people await the moment when Garabandal will be promoted to help the faith of so many that desire to believe in God, and that our Holy Mother Church give us a hand in making a leap forward in a world without faith and in need of courage.
Yo quiero que el mundo se salve porque así lo percibimos en Garabandal, que la Virgen vino para que todos los seres humanos se salvaran.
A las almas les falta sentir la maternidad divina en cada alma, y eso es lo importante que se siente aquí en Garabandal.
One of the things I'd like to see is a medical commission that could do a study on the apparitions in Garabandal and its associated phenomena. First and foremost, the cures related to Garabandal, people who claim to have been cured thanks to Garabandal. I think it's necessary that the case of Garabandal be reopened.
So much happened there that it'll never be compiled in one area. So many people have experienced different things there, different graces, cures, conversions.
We are all headed towards a personal encounter with Jesus. We are all headed towards an intervention from God, in our soul personally, each of us with our first and last name. But in the world as well, there will be a change of direction with respect to how things are now. You can find hope in the fact that many things are going to change for the better.
Garabandal is not a closed matter. Garabandal is not over. I'd say Garabandal is alive.
Heaven is longing to work wonders through the propagation of Our Lady's message today, because these are stories for today. If we let them, heaven will pour out abundant graces. Obviously, the fountain of graces in Garabandal has never been closed. Our Lady is an authentic mother by our side, pouring out an unstoppable waterfall of graces on this earth, because she loves us. Garabandal today is an unstoppable waterfall.
Prometí ser fiel, pero te negué. Conocí tu amor y lo traicioné. Tú quisiste que sintiera sobre mí tu amor. Cuando llegue a ti, llegaré a mi hogar. Y en la noche dudé y tuve miedo, me aparté de ti. No te vayas, no nos dejes, madre, tú nunca abandonarás a tus hijos que te aguardan, a tus pies, madre, en Garabandal. Soy tan feliz de tu mano, todo es nuevo por tu amor. Y en Garabandal tu presencia desbordó mi corazón. Siempre virgen fiel, todo tuyo soy. Por tu amor iré donde quieras tú. Tú quisiste que sintiera sobre mí tu amor. Cuando llegue a ti, llegaré a mi hogar. Y un torrente desbordado fue tu amor por mí. No te vayas, no nos dejes, madre, tú nunca abandonarás a tus hijos que te aguardan, a tus pies, madre, en Garabandal. Soy tan feliz